we're talking about schedule before we, the schedule of the agenda, that is, before, and now I'll get started. The purpose of the meeting today is to discuss various open items and other emerging issues that may come up during the review of the North Anna Unit 3 combined license application review. More specifically, we're going to be discussing, hang on for a second, REI 251-4B for the next 15 to 30 minutes. We'll see how it goes. Then we're going to be discussing the seismic audit plan, the overall plan for the seismic review and supporting upcoming audits. Then we're going to be discussing REI 3742, which is a seismic-related REI, roughly. And those are the specific details. This is the first bi-weekly conference call, public conference call, so the agenda sort of gets filled in, and if there's no need for the call, we'll cancel, but there are some items to discuss today, obviously. Anyone from the public who's on the line can contact me at 301-415-1383 to request a public meeting feedback form, and I'll send you one to fill out. And again, my name is Terry Westberg. I'm in the room with Chandu Patel and Alice Stevie. And anybody on the NRC besides John, you want to introduce?
Vladimir Greiser is here.
Klaus Vlad.
David Hazel.
David.
Oh, maybe Lisa.
Is Lisa on the line?
David, where are you? Are you calling from home, David?
No, I'm downstairs.
Can you see if Lisa is there? Please, can you send her to 10?
Yeah, just a moment.
One, please.
Just a moment.
Thanks. I'd like to get introductions from the Dominion staff and anyone working with Dominion. And please take your time announcing so I can write people down or check you off.
Hi, Perry. This is Peter Borsch, Ben Evans, and John Waddell from Dominion.
From G. Hitachi, it's Skip Shumitz, David Hines, and Lubin Todovsky.
Okay, hang on for just a second. David Hines is from
DH.
It's Rubin.
I got Lubin.
Oh, Rubin.
He's a regular.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, next, anyone else want to go?
This is Dan Howard with Floor.
Mark Loeffler from Entercon supporting Dominion.
Thank you.
Hadidot Hashemi from Bechtel supporting Dominion.
Thank you.
And Bechtel, Frederick supporting Dominion. This is Doug Kemp. That's James Haldeman, Dave Fenster.
All right, hang on for just a second.
Okay.
I'll probably work on the list with Gina afterwards.
Yes, Gina, how about sending the list, please, to Perry? That will be a lot easier.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
That's great. My method was falling apart pretty quickly.
That's all right.
Let's keep going, though. Please introduce everyone else. I just won't write them down.
Okay. Steve Ralph. And then, Scott, you want to introduce from LC?
Yeah, and from Lettuce Consultants, it's Scott Linval and Ross Hartlip.
Thank you. Next.
That's
everybody?
it for us, I think, Perry.
Okay, thanks very much. Any members of the public online?
Hello, this is Erica Gray calling from Henrico, Virginia.
Hi, good afternoon, Erica.
Hi.
Anybody Anybody else from the public?
David,
Mute on.
David Martin, Chester, Virginia.
Hi, David.
Mute on.
Covers everybody, am I correct? Speak up if not. For Erica and David's sake, this is a Category 1 meeting. The public is invited to observe or listen into the meeting, and we'll have one or more opportunities to communicate with the NRC after the business portion of the meeting, but before the meeting is adjourned. So there will be one opportunity in this case. This is a kind of a generic statement. When we finish discussing REI 3742 or the technical portion of the seismic audit, we'll poll you for comments or questions. So with that, I think we're ready to begin the discussion of REI 2514B. And I'm not sure who's going to kick off.
I guess I will.
Alice?
Yeah, that's my question.
Alice.
So this is Alice Stevie from NRC. And, of course, this is for Dave and Scott and Ross. So this spills over into question 5, too. In your response for both question 4 and 5, you're stating that erosion susceptibility contrasts and big increases in stream power, or drainage area increases, are responsible in large part for the topographic lineaments or the stream profile nick zones or points or the gradient changes. And these are alternative to a tectonic cause for the same things, for nick points and gradient changes. So in looking at response to 4B, your text is not matching what I see in your maps. In other words, your maps and figures are really not substantiating the argument that you're advancing. And I am looking at figures in particular for this conversation, 5A, 5B, and 6 for question 4. And in figure 5B, this is a LiDAR slope map, and you are pointing out a northeast striking topographic lineament with a northwest facing scarp. And the lineament is more or less coincident with the geologic contact between the Ellisville Pluton and the Chappawampsic terrain lithologies, as well as Burton et al.'s Harris Creek Fault. And you're stating that this topographic expression is due to a sharp contrast in the erosion susceptibility between the Ellisville Pluton and the Chappawampsic terrain rocks, and imply that it is not the topographic expression of the Harris Creek Fault because the escarpment dies out to the northeast, east of Beaver Creek, where the fault is positioned entirely within the Chappawampsic terrain lithology. So, in figure 5B and also 7, I see that northwest facing lineament escarpment, and I see it clearly extending beyond Beaver Creek, east beyond Beaver Creek, beyond where the contact between the Ellisville Pluton and the Chappawampsic lithologies are. So where the Harris Creek continues on and is in the same rock on either side of the fault. So that I think the Harris Creek Fault might actually have a topographic expression, and that this is not just an erosional contrast between lithologies. So, and then you point out another topographic lineament on the northwest contact of the Ellisville neck, contacting with the Chappawampsic further to the northwest. And this lineament has a southeast facing scarp. And this is inconsistent with thrust fault movement to the northwest. So this scarp can't be tectonic. And then from there on, you pretty much are making strong conclusions or statements so that all these elevation highs are more or less related to the erosion susceptibility contrast. And you also carry that through into question 7, which is, the last question I asked you. So anyway, so I see this scarp in the LiDAR, and when I did that, I printed it out on paper, and I hold it up kind of like at eyeball's length, and I'm looking along the strike, and I can see that escarpment extending beyond the Beaver Creek, beyond where you're talking about the lithologic contrast. So, and following out the northeast extent of Harris Creek Fault. And then on figure 6, you've got a LiDAR-derived relief map, and it's also, the legend says it's showing elevation differences. And I see that, and so look at the contact between the Ellisville granodiorite and the Chappawampsic terrain. And in the neck area, yeah, there's a nice topographic high on the northwest side of the neck and on the southeast side of the neck. But as you continue on out to the northeast, on the southeast side of Ellisville, that elevation difference disappears, and there's no difference between the Ellisville granodiorite and the Chappawampsic. So that erosion difference isn't there. It just occurs in the neck, and that neck is also where the epicentral area is, and where the Quail Fault surface rupture potential is. So let's see here. So I see high elevation differences also concentrated in that box of the epicentral area in the zone of the Quail Fault surface. I see red, a lot of red, so it's high, so the local relief is high. And then immediately to the northeast, in the same terrain, the Chappawampsic terrain, I don't see any of that. And it looks to me like you've got the epicentral area has a concentration of highs in it, and as well as the Quail, where the Quail Fault extends to the surface. So I'm kind of like not thinking that your text is exactly in line with these observations.
Thank you, Alice. This is Gina, for explaining what you're noticing. Scott or Dave, do you want to address the comments or the observations that Alice made?
Sure. Well, regarding the relief map on Figure 6, as well as the Figure 5B, where we see changes in relief, we see topographic lineaments or escarpments, if you will. We see, and actually even throughout the countryside, we see a lot of things that are definitely topographic control. The topographic is controlled. Topography is controlled by lithology. A great example is the quartzite rich rocks, which is that blue lineament to the north on Figure 5B.
Right.
So with respect to the Harris Creek Fault contact in particular, I think that the escarpment, which seems to be very well pronounced to the southwest of Beaver Creek, southwest. As you go northwest of Beaver Creek, northeast, excuse me, it really becomes much less apparent. And we have trouble finding that, the location where Burton et al. Has placed it, which is south of that tributary drainage to Beaver Creek.
Are you talking about the fault now, or the topographic expression?
I'm talking about the Harris Creek Fault,
Okay.
Northeast of Beaver Creek.
Right.
So I don't think there is as significant a topographic expression there as it is to the southwest, excuse me, sorry.
Yeah.
And if you were to slide the fault anywhere and claim a topographic relief, if you slide it right up the tributary drainage that's more, it's sub-parallel to the fault, maybe between there and the place to the north. But as it's mapped, cutting through those 1, 2, 3 spurs, if you will, that are striking, north, basically westerly, I don't see that relief cutting across those three ridges.
Well, I mean, all I have is a paper figure 5B. I don't have the benefit of all the LiDAR sitting in front of me. And when I look down the strike of that escarpment, I mean, I can draw a continuous line from where it is quite prominent. I can draw it right across that. And whether or not it exactly coincides or is co-located with Harris Creek Fault, it's approximately, and maybe that's not the only issue, but you're making a strong argument in this response as well as other responses that it's the lithologic erodibility contrasts that are responsible for this, and then you're kind of like, diminishing the possibility of other things that could possibly be an indication of tectonic in the epicentral area. And I'm just saying that you're saying that it goes away. You say it in the text that the escarpment goes away when the Harris Creek Fault leaves that area where it is positioning granodiorite next to Chapawamsek terrain rock, and that would be to the east of Beaver Creek. And I just see it continuing through. So I don't think you've got, you're considering all the alternatives here. So anyway, but even further, with the lithologic contrast, if we go into that figure 6 and look at the elevation difference in the neck area, I see it. I see there's clearly a granodiorite kind of low, and there's a high on either side. But but the thing is, if you're making an erosion contrast argument for things, that argument doesn't continue to the northeast along the same contact. It's the same color on both sides of the contact. So there still is differences in the lithology. And then further, if you look at where it's nice and warm and red, you look at the box of the epicentral area, and you look at the kind of a box that goes around the Quail Fault Zone. That area is all kind of red. It's high. It's unusual. It's anomalously high in comparison to the Chapawamsek terrain that's immediately to the northeast. And so to me, I think that you're emphasizing the erosion contrast to the exclusion of other possibilities, and your figure is just not supporting that strong of an argument.
Well, Alice, I see what you're pointing out. I think the evidence, though, is that really strongly supports a large erosional component to this, is that you see high relief on either side of the tail. The tail is foliated. The tail has been mapped as with faults on pieces on both sides of the tail. So I suspect the rock within the tail is probably more susceptible to erosion than the larger mass of the Pluton.
Okay, but then explain why you have the highs within the epicentral box, and then immediately to the northeast in Chapawamsek terrain, it's diminished. It's almost neutral.
Right, and then they pick up again as you go further northeast. You start picking things up, and if you look at a larger region, based on just the not the LiDAR, but the 10-meter DEM, you see areas that are relatively high, relatively low, and a lot of those lower areas correspond to areas that have more intense drainage networks. So I can see what you're saying on this figure, but if you look at a larger area, you see these highs and lows come and go.
Okay, but now the area we're looking at is where the LiDAR data is, which is the highest resolution. That's the best data set. That's the most recent, and it's what's I don't know what the plus or minus is on it. I forget what the details, but that's a pretty. So you're in some respects comparing apples and oranges with that. Between your DEM and the LiDAR topography. All right. Well, let's go on to. So my concern is also about what's going on in in question 5. So, but the Harris Creek Fault is after reading these REI responses and looking at Burton et al.'s geologic map, it looks to me like the Harris Creek Fault is becoming an important structure in this overall discussion. Burton et al. Has done the most recent mapping, and he has focused on the epicentral area, and he's done it at 1 to 24,000 scale in comparison to the others who've done it at 1 to 100,000 or whatever.
Right.
And so then there's the Harris Creek Fault he's got there, and then the Quail Fault plane projects to the same area, kind of like, and then your LIDAR map that shows the topographic lineament that goes northeast across the area and extending beyond Beaver Creek. And then also in your profile evaluations in question 5, you're talking about large drainage jumps or drainage area jumps at tributary junctions, and that's also in the same area. So everything is kind of like coming together in this area where Harris Creek and Beaver Creek and South Anna River all start coming together, and you've got you got a lot of geologic contacts in there and all that, and to me that would be the essential focus for whether or not you've got erosion, erodibility contrast, or whether it's stream drainage, stream power kicking up and influencing the profiles as well. So so when I go to Q5, question 5, I would expect to have seen some of these contacts, like from Burton, on those profiles, but that in question Q5, you're not using the same geologic map. You're not using Burton et al.'s map. You're using the earlier maps, and so you know how those geologic contacts move around. I mean, the Chappawansik Fault has been shifted around a good bit depending upon what researcher you're looking, and then of course the Harris Creek Fault is, to me, is a rather important image now in my mind because of the confluence of all these things right there where Burton has it plotted, and you've got stream profiles there: Beaver Creek, Harris Creek, and South Anna. And so that stuff is not transferred onto the stream profile data. So it's hard to verify when you talk about nick points being associated with lithologic erodibility contrast. I really can't verify that by looking at the figures that you provide. So anyway, let's see, most recent.
Okay, well, point well taken. The profiles were drawn initially prior to the publication of this Burton map, and the other reason is they're not shown on these profiles is because the Burton map does not extend the full length of the profiles either.
Right.
Now they could be supplemented with the Burton for the narrower reaches, but that's why they were done with the other geologic maps.
Well, you show the stream profiles as generally well graded with and nick points or gradient changes don't show up very well, even with your 25-time vertical exaggeration. So did you look at other derivatives from LIDAR data that might provide a different perspective on that profile data, such as river slope versus distance, or cumulative drainage area versus distance, in addition to just 25x elevation versus distance?
No, well, we had played with the vertical exaggerations. We put some to about 100, and then you start seeing a lot of noise in your profile as your drainage or your profile cuts the incision of the stream back and forth. It bounces from your alluvial plain in the bottom of the drainage to down inside your incision, and it picks up these little things in the LIDAR.
Right.
So when you go to 100, you start seeing more of they become more apparent, say these nick points, but you also start introducing lots of other noise.
Right. So but that's why
different scales.
So that's why I bring up that maybe exaggerating it, just elevation versus distance, maybe that's not the way to go because it introduces too much artifact. And, when you look at geomorphology papers where they're evaluating neotectonic questions, they're using other kinds of things like slope distance profile. And that exaggerates the nick zones without having to exaggerate the vertical elevation. And so if you were to focus, say if you focus on Harris Creek Fault, or where the projection of the Quail Fault is on these streams, Harris, Beaver, and South Anna, using some of these other types of derivatives, maybe you would be able to better substantiate your conclusions about lithology changes being the problem or the increase in drainage area causing the nick points. And also when so when you argue that the drainage areas are causing the nick points on the profiles, I can't go back to the maps and find out how to verify that. So if you were plotting drainage area versus distance on South Anna River to highlight the Beaver Creek, Harris Creek, and Roundabout Creek tributary junctions, that would illustrate the point you make very easily in a graphical sense. Because the figures are to the profiles, the maps to the profiles don't have enough information for me to go back and forth and verify one thing against the other.
Okay, excuse me, this is Chandu Patel. I guess, let me ask Alice first. Do you think you have longer? Okay, so right now we are going to they got your point.
I got my point.
And yes, and I think they understand. And we will have to go on to the next point. And then what we will do is, like, whenever they are ready, we could have some spatial arrangement for you. And we will have to arrange something for follow-up. Okay? But they were good points, and they have taken it. So I appreciate we underestimated your time, basically, because we did not know, okay? Okay, sorry. Keep going to the next one.
Well, we have...
Chandu, can I just check for a second? This is Gina. May I just check with Scott just to see if he has any last-minute questions for Alice before we end that, just to make sure that we understand and can do something with what was said?
Of course.
No, I think I understand Alice's concerns. I think we're looking at, I think a lot of these maps, the geologic maps, and with the LiDAR, we tried to keep it, the one of the RAIs you'd ask for scale, and it was, about 1 to 10, I want to say, but they tried to keep them detailed enough and local enough so you could see that. But it seems to me like varying that, it might be helpful. And I know what you're saying in terms of other derivatives, so no, I don't think I have any other questions for you at this time.
Okay. Hey, this is John Kloss, NRC. I don't know on this particular point and topic if we're talking about that Dominion's going to look at their current submissions and see if they can add or provide more clarity between the story that the figures provide and the text that describes the effects, or if we're talking you're going to provide additional diagrams to better assist the technical review. Where are we headed here?
I think what we have to do, John, is to talk internally and see what would be the best strategy, and then have a follow-up call with y'all to tell you what our plan would be to see if that would satisfy Alice.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand. Thank you.
And we do have another public call noticed for the 24th of July.
Okay.
2 o'clock or 1 o'clock?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock in the afternoon. The notice should be out today.
We'll have to discuss, afterward once they get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Go to the next, please. Sorry. Is Manuel
We'd like
here?
to...
Manuel, you are here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, the next subject matter is...
Thank you.
Is the audit and support information, the seismic review audits and the support information that we've discussed with Dominion. This is a technical portion. we've broken down the RAIs